My name is Alia Azariah. I'm the director of aftercare for Safe House Project. I am also a person with lived experience, and this Safe House Project webinar series has been something I've been doing about 2 years to draw attention to areas within the anti-trafficking movement or field where we still see significant gaps in knowledge. And so my intention with these series has never been to say that we at Safe House Project or me myself know everything, but to bring experts on each of these topics who do have answer to you all, to be able to open eyes, start conversations, and hopefully continue conversations, because on every topic, there are things that could be 3-day seminars. In no way are we going to give you a full comprehensive understanding in an hour, but hopefully it's the start of a conversation. And we know that maybe not everyone is working with a very high population of Indigenous American survivors, but we are still striving to create equitable access to care and culturally informed responses to human trafficking for every survivor, even if it is only one person in your part of the area or someone who accesses your services. And to do that, we must understand the needs of all people. And so excited to hear from our panelists today. So I'm going to start with Tammy. Tammy Bitanga is serving as the interim director of community for Ho'ola. I'm going to try and not butcher it this time. Ho'ola Napua's team on Oahu. And she is just a wonderful person. I think many of us know Tammy. She previously served as a volunteer coordinator at Pearl Haven and specialized in the residential treatment campus, and helped join the community to get them involved in volunteers events. Her life stories about rising out of circumstances of child abuse that led to being in the system, runaway, victimization, and really despair. And she highlights the need for advocacy and mentoring for trafficking victims. She is the winner of the 2023 Liberator Award, Female Survivor of the Year, and facilitates trainings for human services, law enforcement, and first responders. So we're really grateful to have you here, Tammy. Thank you. We also have Kailita Gomez. Kailita is a case manager at an organization in Sioux Falls called Call to Freedom. And she has a passion for helping others and spread love and kindness to everyone that she meets. She was born and raised in Nebraska on the Omaha Indian Reservation, and she moved to Sioux Falls to pursue her degree. Lea Wetzel is our third panelist. She works with people in recovery. She has a master's in cultural humility, as well as master trained in Samsa Gaines TTT, how being trauma informed improves criminal justice system responses. She is also liaison for the state of Montana under the BHDD Drop-In Center projects, and she takes pride in being a force under Montana's peer network. She was the president of the North Central Montana Human Trafficking and MIP, Murdered and Missing Indigenous People Task Force, before being elected the first ever director for Big Sky MIP. So really excited to have you here as well, Lea. And last but certainly not least, Lynnette Grable. She's been an active advocate for Indian country for over 10 years. She's the founder and director of Not Our Native Daughters, an organization that focuses on the work and education of human trafficking and the missing murdered Indigenous women and girls. And she also serves on the Wyoming Governor's Task Force for Missing Murdered Indigenous Persons and the Wyoming Human Trafficking Task Force, to which she proposed Wyoming Governor Gordon create and implement the MMIP task force. So clearly some very qualified people to get us started here. And so thank you all panelists for being willing to come on and share your expertise and your input and your perspective. And so for those of us who might not be familiar, how is human trafficking affecting Native communities?
I will go ahead and go first. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, everyone, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're at. Uh, First of all, I just want to say thank you for everybody who is interested on this topic, who is willing to engage and learn more. One thing I always tell my kids is that we can learn every single day until the day we die if we're open to it. So again, I'm grateful for everyone who has participated and who has led this group. I believe that the selling, the exploitation, the trafficking of Indigenous people and women and girls has been a forever thing. It's not a new thing. In the last 5 years, there's been traction in the lower 48 on the MMIW, MMIP movement, which started with our First Nations relatives in Canada. But prior to then, a lot of us were working on anti-human trafficking, exploitation of Indigenous people for both on an urban setting and a reservation setting. And one thing I always say when I speak is that the selling and the exploitation and the even trading of Indigenous people and children has been an ongoing thing since the first settlers and colonizers had came to this land. It was something that has been documented by Christopher Columbus. He started off exploiting and trading children from Haiti and the first islands that he impacted. He wrote letters to the Queen and the Queen aides when he reached the Americas and stated that we have scouts who look out for young girls as young as 9 years old. So this is an ongoing thing. And this is only have been modernized for the time being, that the times that we live in now. It's something that a lot of us been working on for a very long time. When I started my organization back in 2000, the statistics at that time was that Native American women were the most stalked, raped, murdered, and even exploited and suffer domestic violence 50 times higher than a national average than any other ethnicity and woman in this nation. And today, today, as we speak today and share this information with you all, it is the statistics have not changed. So we are still fighting an uphill battle. And the more of those who work in the public, work in social services, it doesn't have to be directly victim advocates, but just any form of public services, this type of education and discussion is needed.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, Lynnette. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add on that topic?
Yeah, I do want to just add a tiny bit of, I'm in Hawaii, the state of Hawaii. We are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We have had a lot of study being done. And what we find is, and I am not a statistic person, I say one person, I'm not going to put numbers on anything today. For one, because that's underreported. And so I'm just like, wait, what? How do you even get a number when a victim doesn't actually even know they're a victim because they've grown up in that culture of this is what you do in our family. So in Hawaii, we do find that things are underreported, but our population, so Native Hawaiians, and now just also a disclosure, I am not Native Hawaiian. My koko, my blood is Okinawan. We are also Indigenous people. But when we look at it, the Japanese people, all people of Indigenous background are being exploited. So like Lynnette said, it's beyond my comprehension sometimes as to how we are continuously being exploited. So I just wanted to just bring that. Native Hawaiians, from the day that anything landed, nobody discovered Hawaii. We had 1 million Hawaiians populated in the Hawaiian Islands before anybody got here. Okay, I'm gonna leave that.
Thank you, Tammy. Lea, I know this is something that you wanted to speak to also.
Yeah, Oki, hello everybody. I'm Lea Wetzel. So up here in Montana, we have 12 federally recognized tribes, 13, maybe even more other tribes. And with such a large population of tribal community, we see a lot of issues with the jurisdictional maze between federal, state, county, tribal. So many times you hear families that are affected by this or survivors like myself. There's just such a confusion of who to go to, how to handle it. There's a lot of lack of support and resources. And one thing that we're seeing a lot of out here in Montana too is labor trafficking And with us being right next to the Canadian border, as Miss Grable said, there's generations and generations of outsiders coming and marrying into tribal lands. It makes it even harder to persecute people.
Thank you. And that, Leah, are we seeing a certain type of trafficking present more frequently in Native communities?
I think the human trafficking crises occur a little bit different from those who are trafficked from tribal lands, reservation land, versus Indigenous people who live in the city or the urban setting, and then they get trafficked. So there's two different pathways of how Indigenous people get trafficked. And what we've seen in probably more than 10 years, but the work that I've been doing is the youth, the underage ones that get trafficked off of the reservation. And a lot of us know this, but there's a lot of grooming online on social media that goes into it. So I know a lot of cases where underage kids, even under the age of 10, that get trafficked out of the reservation. They utilize us here in the 575 nations that we have in our country. Majority of them suffer extreme poverty. So they utilize the poverty as a tool to even send them gifts prior to meeting their pimp or trafficker, pay for bills or cash app or send money. So the cases that I've seen where underage Native peoples are getting trafficked or Native children are getting trafficked is because they're relying on the vulnerabilities of the extreme poverty or the vulnerabilities of not having maybe a sound foundation at home. And unfortunately, with the missing children from tribal nations, a lot of cases that have been investigated, they've seen that there was a lot of grooming involved, sometimes 6 months, even longer, sometimes a year before they're actually abstracted off of the reservation, versus when we have either underage or even adults who get trafficked out of the urban setting, it's your typical trafficking scenarios that the different pathways of getting trafficked out of the city that occurs too with Native peoples. And lastly, I just want to make this last statement. And some of the studies that I've been involved in with human trafficking of Native Americans, we've seen that, and this is a horrible way to understand trafficking of Indigenous people, but traffickers and pimps like to target Native American victims in human trafficking because the marketing rate is a little bit higher. I've seen cases where trafficking of Indigenous people not only can be marketed as a Native American or Indigenous person, but they also could be marketed as Islander, Asian, Pacific Islander, Hawaiian, Latino, and other ethnicity and races. Unfortunately, that is a factor of trafficking of Indigenous people.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. I'm also echoing some of what you said. What it sounds like, similar to some of the other systemically devalued people in our country, but significantly affecting Native communities, is we're starting out for the majority or for many Native people with vulnerabilities. Like just being born into this culture, this experience, this life is creating a vulnerability because of the history of this lived experience of being a Native person. And so whether it be Native Hawaiian, Native American, or other Indigenous people, just being part of this minority culture, but not only a minority culture that has this history of extreme trauma at the hands of the majority culture. And like you said, Lynnette, including trafficking from day one. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm trying to process some of all of this as well.
I did want to add, can I add
Go
a little
ahead,
bit
Tammy.
to that?
Yes, please.
Also across the board, we see that people are like, that's what they like, that's what they want to do. In the Asian culture, we're so submissive, right? Oh, they like that, or that's what they're for, the comfort women of Japan, like that. So just piggybacking on what Lynnette said is that it's marketable. If in my experience, I will be anything you want me to be, really. If the guy wanted a Filipino, I could be Filipino. If they wanted whatever, I was up in Alaska, I could be of that nation. So it's really what traffickers are targeting so that they can market it and they can get all that. For me, it's definitely like it pulls on me because I have so many clients that are of so many different nationality, race, ethnicity. And when I listen to them, it didn't change. 40 years ago, it's still the same. So
Yeah.
we are the change, I think. Finally, we're
Yeah.
talking about it.
Thank you. When Native people are looking to access services, what are some of the unique challenges that they're facing?
I can answer to some of this. So a lot of lack of resources, a lot of lack of funding. Our American Indians get about 1% and our women get less than that when it comes to federal and nonprofit type funding for these types of services. I know within my own case, even using something like the Vine app, I got 5 different dates, 5 different times to show up at an offender's sentencing, parole hearings. I think there's just a lot of lack of support. And I think a lot of lack of survivor-based influence, right? Because as survivors of human trafficking and surviving family members of MMIP, we're the true experts. And I think that's overlooked a lot. I'm grateful that here in Montana, on the state level, in some areas, they're trying to get on board with that, giving a space for a trauma-informed space for survivors to speak up. But I think it's just a lot of lack of knowledge, disconnect of what's out there, and also culturally, each tribe has their own unique ways. Within my one tribe, we have 6 bands. We're the only band that's in America. Through just that, our societies, our bands, our clans all have different ways and even different ways of spelling our language or speaking our language. And so it's so important that we have culturally significant influence within this support available, because we do know that culture is prevention. And I think there's a lot of lack of support in between if somebody has SUD, substance use disorder, or behavioral health, which I can speak on because I am co-occurring myself. I'm a woman in recovery. There's a lot of lack of support in between treatment and that space between the crime happening, being victimized, and the survivor speaking at court, being available. That's so important for us to be there. And it's so important for our own journey to empower ourselves and others to speak up. But that area in between, that support, there's not much there where I live. There isn't. So I hope that was helpful.
Very. Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak on that?
Yeah, Leah brought a really good part. Culture is healing and culture is prevention. And unfortunately, what we see across our nation is that we see other organizations who are capitalizing on the MMIW movement, even on the human trafficking of Indigenous people movement. And it's not Native-led. It's not Native-led. It's not survivor-led. It's not those who went through many years of restoration or trauma-informed care, healing or counseling. And I think that's really important when you're working in the realm of healing. I think Native people, regardless, put aside MMIW and human trafficking, we are still trying to gain our bearings from the colonization, the boarding school era. One thing I always say is I never went to boarding school, but my parents did. And I had to live the passed down trauma, the associate trauma of the boarding school era. And us as Indigenous people, we are still in the process of healing from what happened 50, 100 plus years ago. And then you throw in exploitation and trafficking and being missing. And on top of that, having lack of law enforcement response to our cases. There's so many avenues we can go down with that one. But I would say that it is very important that for any person or any organization that is embarking on healing or restoration, rehabilitation, that one, it be Native-led, two, it be survivor-led. Also, I would like to mention is that there's 575 tribes throughout our nation. And Native American women suffer the domestic violence 50 times higher than the national average. But out of those 575 tribes, 58 of those tribes are the only ones that have a domestic violence shelter. So domestic violence shelters and safe houses is something that I've been working on for the past 2 years. I'm in the Northern Plains region. I would say that the human trafficking, anti-human trafficking work across Indian country, the MMIP resources are pretty good up in the North Pacific, Southwest, in those regions. But in the realm of resources and funding, the Northern Plains region, the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, and even Colorado, we still have yet to really obtain strong, sound support, not just funding wise, but just having places to place our victims. If I come across a victim of trafficking or any type of exploitation, we have nothing here in our state, so we have to send them out of state. And the victims that I've worked with, where especially the underage ones that had to either be to a safe house or even the adult ones that had to go out of state, 9 times out of 10, those healing pathways do not work because they need to be close to their family, they need to be close to their culture, they need to be close to our cultural practices of healing. And it doesn't work when we have to send our victims out of state.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to the unique challenges when someone's looking to access services?
I think.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I think Lynnette just
Nope.
made a great point. Like, community in Indigenous populations that's what Indigenous people are, is community. So taking them away from that community and not creating a place for them to heal where they can still have their culture and they can still have their community there, it's not going to work. You have to have the culture and you have to have that community where they're at so they can heal in their time and learn their culture and maybe reignite with their culture. They might have lost touch, or they might have trauma from their culture. Their trafficking might have happened on their reservation, but creating that safe space where that community is going to be a huge part of recovery for them.
Thank you, Kyleta. And I'm gonna direct this question to you as well, because one thing that we as an organization, when we're being allowed into safe house programs to do evaluations or certifications, one thing that we're looking at is the population that they're serving representative of the population in their area or in their state. And so when we had the opportunity to do that at Call to Freedom, the organization that Kyleta looks at, one thing we saw was that in South Dakota, about 50%, if not more, of the people that they were serving were Native people. And so knowing that, Kyleta, what are some of the things, whether they be partnerships or practices, that Call to Freedom has put into place to ensure that you're creating that equity for access, but then also responding to the cultural needs?
Sure. I would just say, first of all, we are a survivor-led organization. And so any survivor that comes through our doors, they're an individual. So we're going to take their story, we're going to listen to their individual experience, and then we're going to say, okay, what can we do to help you through your journey? With our Native American population here, really, again, just that community. So at Marissa's house here, we do have several Native American women. And so just allowing them to build that community here. And it really is a family. We have just a bunch of aunties here, and everybody is safe here. And giving them that safe space to practice saging and smudging and encouraging that, just beading and partnering with organizations such as Urban Indian Health, where you can walk into an organization and somebody looks like you, has lived experience like you, and they just say, I see you and I know what you've gone through. There's a certain solidarity in that you can't recreate anywhere else. So just, again, like Lynnette said, having Indigenous led organizations that we can point people in the direction of, and then just, asking them, where are you at in your recovery, and how does your culture play a part of that? And really just walking with them through that.
Yeah. And something that I was struck with when I was there was that not all of it needs to be in-house. So much of this can be done with organizations in our area that are doing these things well. So like with your partnership with Urban Indian Health, they have the Red Road Recovery, like Native specific recovery services, beading classes, all of these things that was like, we can access these resources. We don't need to someone like hoard our survivors essentially in order for them to get healing. This is their journey, and providing them access to the services, whether they be in-house or not, that are going to respond in a way that is going to lead them to the most healing in their own journey. And Tammy, I know that you guys over there have some practices that you put into place to respond in culturally supportive ways. Can you speak to those a little bit?
Yeah, so the reason that Ho'olanapua even exists is because we were sending our children to the continent. Some people call it the mainland. It's very offensive to Native Hawaiian people, to us as an island people, that we are part of the United States. That's also controversial, so I won't put that out there. It's not funny. I think that's one of my coping mechanisms, is that I just giggle when I think something's okay. I'm not going to keep going down that rabbit hole. So anyhow, lots of things that we can talk about here, but I'll try to stay on track. So we were sending our children out of state to treatment programs to treat their trauma. There was a lot of behavior modification. We were not trying when we're looking at our children that are traumatized, we are not looking to modify their behavior. We're looking for healing. And we weren't finding that was being done. We were finding that children were modifying their behavior. They were acting a certain way because they were spoken to and told to act a certain way. And then when they came home, they still had so much holding on, and they were not being able to move to the next path in their life. Creating Ho'olanapua, creating a place of healing, we call Pearl Haven. We sit on 12 acres. It is restored from a place was originally for boys, traumatized boys, back in the 1920s. It was an industrial farm where they send all the bad boys. They're not bad boys. They are boys that have been traumatized. But when you look at the roster, it's Native Hawaiian. Yeah, there's hardly any other, lots of Portuguese kids, but those are plantation kids, yeah? And so we got this property, 12 acres on Oahu, and we provide care for children who have been exploited or who have been traumatized. So we're not looking at exactly, oh, if you're a traffic girl, you're gonna go to Pearl Haven. No, it's children that have suffered severe emotional disturbance is the word. And so they come, and what we do there is I am involved with the cultural community out on the whole islands. Like I'll bring a practitioner in from Maui if need. I'll bring somebody from Lanai if need, Hawaii Island if need. So I always asking the kids, what is it that you want to do? And so I have children that are of Latina descent. So we made tamales. because that is what she wanted to do. And they do it for her family every time Thanksgiving. So we made tamales. We bought all the stuff. We looked up the recipe. She took the memories that she had already to making the tamales from her family. And it was the best tamales ever. We have kalo, which is taro. So we grow kalo on our property. And so we teach them how to, if they come from out of state, or because that's what happened now. I'm going all over, I'm sorry. Now the children coming from the continent to Pearl Haven, because the practices that we do and what we're showing, the healing. We've been in work for 2 years. And so we've had some people complete the program, and we've been getting a good talking about the practice works. What we're doing at Pearl Haven is helping children to heal. Is it all Paul healed, finish? No, it's a journey, right? Pearl Haven is one stepping stone in their journey. So when we're talking about like, how does it impact them? It is asking, what is it that you would like to do? We do have Native American, we have many tribes on our islands. I have already asked one of the auntie, because she's part Native Hawaiian and part Native American. And I asked her, Auntie, can you come and teach us how to make the flatbread? Can you come teach us how to bead? And they're like, yes, when are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? So I'm going to bring them in, to help us. We have one girl identified, she has of the Cherokee tribe. So I'm working on that part of the Native Hawaiian. We have many practitioners that come in, but around food is the most that we're able to integrate their culture in, and everything that we're doing at Pearl Haven. When we're talking about culture in Hawaii, it is all culture, because we have Filipino, Japanese, Portuguese, Hawaiian, Chinese, every culture, Indian, every Thai, and then also all of the native, because we have Samoan, Tongan, they're all indigenous peoples. We do through food the most, because they're gonna come to say, oh, I want to make chicken adobo. My grandma then make it. So good, we're gonna make it together. I had one experience which impacts me so much, is that we had a gal come in from Louisiana, and her grandma taught her how to make beignet. And I said, beignet, the little pastry.
Yeah, I think so.
So we're making this, no recipe. She's making it from memory. And then we're frying it. And then she's crying. This is reminding me of my grandma. Her grandma had passed before, but her grandma was the one caregiver for her. And so that really impacted me, that it does make a difference to bring that good memory back. Yeah. So we're creating new memories, good memories. It's very important.
And I think food is such a tangible way to meet someone in their cultural experience, because it uses all of the senses, right? There's smell, there's taste, there's touch, all of those things in order to immerse themselves in their own experience. And so just a great tangible practice. I know this isn't one of our questions on here, but before we jump to Q&A, because I think we ended up in this place, Lea, this question is for you. I know that we had talked when we met about cultural humility, and that's something that you are very passionate about and very knowledgeable about. Can you talk about just how to practice cultural humility, because it's such a big part of this?
Sure. I think number one is we're each individuals. We're each very multidimensional sometimes, and I think it can be natural in certain cultures, or just natural in human nature, to really judge a book by its cover. But I think what's really important is humanizing our conversations, humanizing our experiences, having a balance. There can be a power imbalance in between speaking in survivors, I think, victim services, or in court situations. I think standing by the person, being with them, advocating for them until they can really speak for themselves. I know when I first started the journey of being where I'm at today in my healing journey, I was very hard on myself. Having others prejudge, I think, was really hard. But I think having a space that has non-judgment, a space that's empowering, not taking away from their own journey, allowing them to really choose, like a lot of the ladies said today, asking questions, because we never know what's going to be helpful for somebody. I think really keeping it person-centered. And if you don't know what that is, if you don't know what trauma-informed is, I think educating ourselves is so important. The awareness piece is huge. Hearing from the people that have been impacted by this and listening to them, because so many choices have been made for us for so long. I know even with me being in the criminal justice system at a few parts within my life, I didn't really know how to make choices for myself. So I think empowering people to do is really going to be helpful in the long run.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to open the question. We have some really great questions in the question and answer. But before I move us over there, I want to just provide the space for our panelists. If you have anything else that you want to add, please feel free to do so.
Just really quickly, I concur everything that had Lea just stated. I think I've seen this across I see this across Indigenous programs and within Indigenous tribal programs, and I've also experienced this across Indigenous-led Native American organizations. But I've also seen this across the Survivor Network and those of us who work in safe houses or in the anti-human trafficking network. Healing and empowering and providing healing to others is, I feel, is God's work. I feel like, especially when you have your own story and your own experiences to pull from. But one of the things sometimes, because we're all on different pathways of healing, we see what we call in Indian country, we call it lateral oppression. We call it lateral violence. We shame others. We make remarks about other people. And those types of things, not only is it not professional, but it's also not a place of empowering healing. And we can be a little bit more, not only in the anti-human trafficking space, but also through our Indigenous communities, promote and empower that healing by reframing from that. One thing I teach on lateral violence and lateral oppression and how to undo it in our Indigenous people. And one of the things I say is meet people where they're at. We do that with our survivors. We do that when we work with victims, meet them where they're at. I do that when I work with other professionals. Try your best not to be non-judgmental. But if this is just my perspective, any of us who are working in the healing spaces, recovery, rehabilitation, safe houses, like you have to be right within before you're able to be spread healing outwardly. So for us who are healers, for those who do take the time to nurture and care, especially for victims who come out of trafficking or any type of exploitation, we really have to have our heart and our mind and our spirit in the right place, because you're going to see some things or hear some things you probably don't agree with, but it's not your place to judge where someone is, where they're at in their healing journey. Also understand that if you went through a healing process, that you too were at that space one time or day and age. Just understanding as a person of healing or an organization who promotes healing or a safe house, that we continue to promote healing in all aspects and all forms, especially in the professional realm. We are called subject matter experts. We are called professionals. We should be empowering each other. If we do have problems with other professionals, you go speak to that person directly and be like, hey, I didn't feel like this was right. Or, hey, this is how you direct something that you want to see change. And you do that also in a place of grace and mercy. So I think that is really important for those of us in the healing spaces. You really cannot provide healing to others if you're not healed yourself. And this coincides with getting that trauma-informed care. and the victims that come out of trafficking, they have to go through so much, and so many different types of trauma informed care approaches, because there's no cookie cutter to healing. And one person I might be able to heal by going to sweat lodge and sitting with my elders and processing some things out and praying and singing. And somebody else might do better with direct counseling, or both. So we just have to have an open mind of what healing looks like, because what healing looks like for you is not what healing looks like for everybody else. But if we can be respectful, understanding, and non-judgmental, we're going to get a lot more traction in healing.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
That is so good. That is just amazing, Lynnette. Thank you for just eloquently sharing that. I want to say that it's a continuum. It's a continuum of care. Yeah, when we are with our children, with adult women, with adult men, with adults, sometimes we expect them to act a certain way. Children get a little bit, to me, do it because I said so, right? We cannot even do that nowadays because that's not trauma informed. But it's like you want the best for them. And so you're like, you have to like, how do you meet them there? But that continuum, sometimes the road is really up and down, coming backwards, going forwards. I think I just really want to emphasize that organizations, they think, oh, you're going 9 months, pal. You're going 1 year, pal. 2 years, pal. No, I get kids that they're not kids anymore, but I had them when they were 16 and they're now 26 and they're still struggling. They're going to call me, Mama, can you do something? Auntie, can you do something? I'm not going to tell them, oh, you should know already how you do it. I'm going to be, oh, okay, how can I help you? Or how can I give you a resource? Or how can I teach you to help yourself? Yeah, there's many approaches that we're going to do, but it's taking care. I get so frustrated when I'm listening to sometimes the judgment, the providers, the funder, the donor, like that, they're expecting things to be a certain way. It's not. So we as doing the work, as coming forward, as providing the care, we're going to speak out. We're going to tell them, you taking your money, $1, you think your $1 going to go somewhere. This is where your $1 goes for this much. So don't putting money on top of the care for our people, right? We're going to take its time, its energy, its love. Lynnette, I agree with you. We have to keep pushing forward in this movement of caring for our people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we're not going to have time to do all of the questions, so I'll gather the ones that we don't have time for, but maybe just a couple. Kind of going back to when we had asked about if there was a certain prevalence or a certain way that trafficking was appearing more frequently within Native populations, someone asked if we could share more about the trafficking of Indigenous boys versus girls in trafficking. In trafficking, and does it look different, or are we seeing it look the same?
I'm going to answer this really quickly, and I'm going to allow the other experts to respond. So the cases that I've seen of Indigenous boys, primarily when we see Indigenous underage girls being trafficked out of Native communities, they tend to be anywhere from like 13 to 16 years old. And again, this is just some of the numbers that are able to be pulled out from victims. We know that numbers are just a snapshot of the problem, but unfortunately, with some of these cases, the boys that are trafficked, they tend to be much younger. We see them coming from 9 to 12 years old. And again, we have to understand what fuels trafficking is the demand. So if the demand is younger boys, then you're going to see younger boys being trafficked. For whatever reason, the demand for girls tends to be in the younger teenager years, but the cases I've seen of Native boys have been a lot younger than the girls.
Thank you. Another question around those demographics. Currently, we have a number somewhere about 40%, right, is the recognized number of people who are trafficked, were first trafficked by their family, by a family member. Do we see that number staying about the same in Native populations?
I think it's hard for any of us to quantify what those numbers are in a bigger spectrum and to pull those numbers. I know of case of a familiar trafficking, especially when we see families like who are in drugs or anything of that nature. I've seen a lot of horrific cases come from family members or even friends of the family who have trafficked kids for, sometimes it was not even money, it's for drugs or alcohol and things of that nature, or as we know, as a place to stay. So again, it's really hard to know what that number is when it comes to that, because a lot of those cases don't get quantified.
Absolutely. And there's a huge lack of research regarding the trafficking of Native people. So I think that's reflective in that. When I would love if you all, someone has asked for being pointed towards resources. Do you guys have a thought on what resources, if they want to know more about this, where they should start looking?
Olanapua we can do educational across the nation. Like, we're not just like, we are in Hawaii, but we do webinars every week. So every Wednesday, so I can share out that information. We can push it out. Pearl Haven does have 11 to 17-year-old care. It is residential, specialized residential, and we do intake. We just Alaska, Texas, California, Idaho, we've already had children come from those states. So we do provide care for children out of state. We always serve our children of Hawaii. We make sure that our bed space is prioritized for them. But when we have space and we get a referral, then we will screen that referral and bring them. And I can assure you, from me to you folks, everybody who listening, that we do take care of our children. I very much am hands-on in that process of caring for them. I just took a different role, so I'm not out there as much, but I do go out there 3 to 4 times a month and take care, do cooking and that kind of stuff. And as far as, we have other community programs that I am now the director of, so I am happy to share out, do webinar type training. Come to your state, I will come. Our team will come. We like to get off the rock every once in a while.
Yeah.
I just really quickly would like to say, I'm pretty sure any of the women here can provide training, can provide a lot of levels of subject matter experts, advice, counseling, or even trainings. My organization, Not Our Native Daughters, we are a national MMIW organization, and been working in the anti-human trafficking realm for a very long time. I specialize in training tribal hotels and casinos, hospitality workers on identifying trafficking in their facilities. I also train tribes, social services. I've trained a plethora of different organizations, both small and big, also on cultural sensitivity. This is really important for those who provide services to get cultural sensitivity training, because a lot of people who are not familiar with the Indigenous community will think that one size fits all. And you have to keep in mind, there's 575 tribes. We all have our own culture. We all have our ceremonial practices. We all have our healing practices. So it's good that specifically, let's say you're in a state where you're in Arizona. These are Southwestern tribes in Arizona. You have to understand there's 26 tribes in that state. There's different practices. There's different ways of healing. These type of cultural sensitivity trainings help enhance your process of healing. But again, like I said in the beginning, I'm sure any of these ladies can provide any type of training and subject matter expert advice in this space.
And there are very easy resources online to understand what Native tribes are historically in your region and in your area. If you're trying to understand that specific culture and the people that you're serving, that kind of can point you to where to go to ask for that as well. Lea, do you have additional resources you want to point people to?
Sure. So out here in Montana, we have a project that we've been doing the last couple years called their drop-in center projects. And we started out with 12, we have 8 now. And these are trained, they're peer support. We went to the state and We ask that we be the first state to have one on every tribal area. We do have 12 tribes. We have 7 different reservations. And so that's something that we've been working on with outreach. But I can share some of those drop-in center contact information. These are people that have first interactions with people coming out of these situations. They're a hub of resources for their communities. Indigenous Vision is who trained me in cultural humility. Suta Calling Last is great. These ladies said, each and every one of these ladies on here, I think if we could get a resource list going between all of us, I think that would be awesome to share with everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think so as well. Thank you all for being willing to come on here and share your expertise and inform and teach us. I have learned so much from the calls that I've been able to sit on and from today. So I just really appreciate that. And I know that our attendees do as well. So again, thank you so much, panelists, for being willing to jump on.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.